1995, Hell's Angel adopted 3 girls, not realizing they would save his life 30 years later. The bell above the door chimed as Brock Iron Montgomery pushed through the entrance of Bright Future's adoption agency. His heavy boots echoed against the linoleum floor, and the leather of his vest creaked with each step. The receptionist's eyes widened as she took in his imposing figure, all 6 feet 2 inches of tattooed muscle wrapped in denim and leather. "Can I help you?" Her voice quivered slightly as she straightened in her chair. Brock cleared his throat. "Got an appointment. Montgomery." The waiting room was painted in soft pastels, with cheerful posters of smiling families decorating the walls, a stark contrast to the dimly lit bars and garages he usually frequented. A little boy playing with blocks in the corner caught sight of him and scrambled back to his mother. "Miss Peterson will be right with you," the receptionist said, picking up her phone. Brock lowered himself into one of the small chairs, which groaned under his weight. His fingers drummed against his knee as he waited. He wasn't sure what had led him here. Maybe it was the accident last month that had him thinking about legacy, about purpose. Or maybe he was just tired of the emptiness that greeted him each night when he returned to his apartment. "Mr. Montgomery?" A woman in her 40s appeared, clipboard in hand. "I'm Sarah Peterson. Please follow me." He followed her down a hallway lined with photos of adopted children and their new families. Her heels clicked efficiently against the floor as she led him to a small office. "So," she said, settling behind her desk, "tell me why you're interested in adoption." Brock shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I ain't good at talking about feelings and such, but I got a decent job at the auto shop, own my place, been thinking about family." Sarah's eyes drifted to the Hell's Angels patch on his vest. "Mr. Montgomery, we have a very thorough screening process. Our priority is placing children in stable, safe environments." "I understand that," he said, his voice gruff but earnest. "I know what people see when they look at me, but I'm ready for a change." Something in his tone made Sarah pause. She studied him for a long moment before standing. "There's something I'd like to show you." She led him down another hallway to a large window overlooking a nursery. Inside, several cribs held sleeping infants. Sarah pointed to one in the corner. "These 3 girls were brought in last week. Triplets. Their mother." She hesitated, couldn't care for them. "We try to keep siblings together, but it's difficult finding homes willing to take all 3. Brock stepped closer to the window. In the crib lay 3 tiny bundles, their faces peaceful in sleep. Something stirred in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling that made his throat tight. "Can I?" He gestured toward the nursery door. Sarah nodded, swiping her keycard. Inside, the room was warm and quiet except for the soft sounds of sleeping babies. Brock approached the crib carefully, mindful of his heavy steps. 3 perfect little faces looked up at him. One yawned, another wiggled her tiny fist. The third just watched him with curious eyes. The name cards on their crib read Tiana, Sanaya, and Maya. Standing there, looking down at these helpless little beings, Brock felt something shift inside him. All his years of maintaining a tough exterior, of keeping people at arm's length, seemed to crack just a little. These girls needed someone to protect them, to give them a chance at life. "I'll take them," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. All 3. Sarah, who had been watching from the doorway, saw something in his face that told her this hard-looking man might just be exactly what these girls needed. Brock's Harley rumbled to a stop in front of Bright Future's adoption agency. He'd traded his usual leather vest for a clean denim jacket, though his tattoos still peeked out from under the sleeves. The social worker, Miss Peterson, waited by the entrance with 3 identical baby carriers. "Big day, Mr. Montgomery," she said, a gentle smile on her face. Her eyes darted to his motorcycle, and her smile faltered. "I assume you're not planning to." "Got a truck," he grunted, gesturing to the black pickup parked around the corner. "Already installed the car seats. Triple-checked everything." Relief washed over Miss Peterson's face. Inside, 3 social workers were each holding one of the girls, dressed in matching pink dresses that made Brock's heart do something unfamiliar. The sight of his new daughters, so tiny and delicate, made his calloused hands feel too rough, too unworthy. "Would you like to hold them before we get started on the final paperwork?" Miss Peterson asked. Brock nodded, his throat tight. The first social worker approached with Tiana, showing him how to support her head and cradle her tiny body. The baby looked up at him, with wide, trusting eyes, and his whole world shifted. "Before you continue listening, Please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. One by one, he held each girl. Sania gripped his finger with surprising strength, while Maya immediately tried to stuff his thumb in her mouth. These simple gestures of trust from such innocent beings nearly brought the tough biker to his knees. After signing the final documents, Brock carefully secured each carrier into the truck, checking the straps repeatedly. The drive home was the slowest he'd ever driven, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror to check on his precious cargo. At his apartment, Brock carried the girls up one at a time, his heart pounding with each trip. He'd spent weeks preparing the spare room, painting the walls a soft yellow and assembling 3 white cribs. The room looked almost comically gentle compared to the rest of his leather and chrome-decorated apartment. He set the carriers down in the living room and carefully lifted each girl out. They were alert now, taking in their new surroundings with curious eyes. Tiana immediately reached for the silver chain around his neck, while Sania seemed fascinated by his beard. Maya, the most active of the 3, was already trying to roll over on the plush carpet. "This is home now, little ones," he said, his gruff voice softened with emotion. The girls crawled and scooted around the living room, their pink dresses rustling against the carpet. They reached for him constantly, using his large hands to pull themselves up, giggling when he helped them stand on wobbly legs. Their tiny fingers explored his rough palms, completely unafraid of the man who had intimidated so many others. That evening, after bottles and diaper changes that took twice as long as they should have, Brock laid the girls in their cribs. He stood in the doorway, watching their peaceful faces in the soft glow of the nightlight. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. These 3 innocent lives were now completely dependent on him. One of the girls, Maya, stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Without thinking, Brock moved to her crib, his large hand gently patting her back until she settled. The tenderness of the gesture surprised him. Looking at these 3 sleeping angels, Brock Iron Montgomery, the man who'd never backed down from a fight, felt his hard edges beginning to soften. Dawn broke over the city as 3 simultaneous cries pierced the morning silence. Brock's eyes snapped open, his body moving before his mind fully awakened. The routine was already familiar after 2 weeks. Diapers, bottles, clean clothes. "Easy there, princess," he murmured to Tiana, who squirmed as he struggled with the tiny buttons on her onesie. His large fingers, more accustomed to working on motorcycle engines, fumbled with the delicate fasteners. Next to him, Sanaya waited patiently in her bouncer, while Maya kicked energetically in hers. The morning light caught the silver rings on his fingers as he prepared their bottles. The kitchen counter, once home to beer bottles and takeout containers, now held formula cans, sterilized bottles, and a complicated-looking bottle warmer that the ladies at the baby store had insisted he needed. "Testing, testing," he muttered, squeezing drops of formula onto his wrist like the parenting books had shown him. Too hot meant waiting, too cold meant crying babies. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. By mid-morning, Brock had managed to feed and dress all 3 girls. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by soft toys and colorful playmats. Maya rolled onto her stomach, pushing herself up with determined little arms. Sanaya watched her sister with intense focus before attempting the same move. Tiana, content to stay on her back, cooed at the mobile hanging above. "That's it, little fighters," Brock encouraged, his gruff voice softening automatically when speaking to them. He'd caught himself doing that more often lately, this gentle tone that would have earned him mockery from his biker brothers. The day moved in a blur of diaper changes, naps, and bottles. Brock found himself singing lullabies he didn't even know he remembered, old songs his mother used to hum. His voice was rough and untrained, but the girls seemed to love it, especially when he added motorcycle sound effects to the wheels on the bus. During their afternoon nap, he caught his reflection in the window, the fearsome Iron Montgomery, with a burp cloth over his shoulder and baby spit up on his t-shirt. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he felt a surge of pride. This was harder than any street fight or long-haul ride he'd ever undertaken, but somehow more rewarding. Evening brought the challenge of bath time. He'd learned to bathe them one at a time, keeping the other 2 secured in their bouncy seats within arm's reach. Tiana splashed happily, while Sania observed the water with serious concentration. Maya treated every bath like a swimming competition, leaving Brock's shirt soaked. "You're gonna be trouble when you're older, aren't you?" He chuckled, wrapping Maya in a fluffy towel decorated with ducks. She responded with a toothless grin that melted something in his chest. As night fell, Brock went through their bedtime routine. Clean diapers, warm bottles, soft pajamas. He rocked each girl in turn, their tiny bodies fitting perfectly in his strong arms. The nursery was peaceful, lit only by a star-shaped nightlight. One by one, he laid them in their cribs. Tiana drifted off immediately, clutching her small stuffed elephant. Sania fought sleep the longest, her eyes struggling to stay open until exhaustion won. Maya fell asleep mid-wiggle, one arm flung dramatically above her head. Brock stood in the doorway, watching their peaceful faces. These 3 little girls had completely changed his world in just a few short weeks. The man who once lived for the freedom of the open road now found his greatest joy in the confines of a nursery, surrounded by pink walls and stuffed animals. His heart felt full to bursting as he watched their tiny chests rise and fall with each breath. These were his daughters, his family, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The rumble of motorcycles filled the parking lot of Joe's Bar and Grill. Brock pushed the double stroller toward the entrance, the girls bundled up against the autumn chill. Inside, familiar faces turned to stare as he navigated between the tables. "Well, look who it is. The nanny." Snake, his old riding buddy, called out with a mocking laugh. Other bikers joined in, their amusement echoing off the walls. Brock kept his expression neutral, focusing on getting the girls settled in a corner booth. He'd chosen this time specifically because the bar was quieter, serving lunch instead of its usual rowdy crowd. The waitress, Betty, hurried over with 3 high chairs. "These your little ones, Brock?" she asked kindly, helping him get the girls situated. "They're beautiful." "Yeah, they are," he replied, his voice gruff but proud. He pulled out containers of Cheerios and small cups of juice from the diaper bag, a far cry from the switchblade that used to occupy his leather jacket pocket. Snake sauntered over, beer in hand. "Never thought I'd see the day. Iron Montgomery playing house." He leaned against the booth, eyeing the girls with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "What happened to you, man? You used to be somebody." Tiana grabbed at Snake's dangling chain necklace, giggling. The tough biker stepped back quickly, as if her tiny hands might burn him. "I am somebody," Brock replied, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm their father." From across the room, another voice called out, "You're going soft, Iron. Trading in your wheels for diapers?" Brock calmly wiped Maya's face as she managed to get more food on her cheeks than in her mouth. Sania watched the exchange with serious eyes, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Maybe I am going soft," Brock said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But at least I'm man enough to take care of what's mine." The bar grew quiet. Snake shifted uncomfortably, then walked away without another word. Brock continued feeding the girls, ignoring the whispers and stares around him. Betty returned with his burger and fries. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly. "Those girls are lucky to have you." Brock nodded his thanks, cutting the burger into tiny pieces for the girls to share. He'd learned early on that they loved stealing food from his plate more than eating their own meals. As they finished lunch, Tiana reached for him, her small face scrunched up in concentration. Daddy!" she declared triumphantly. Brock froze, his heart skipping a beat. Maya and Sania, not to be outdone by their sister, immediately echoed the word, "Daddy, Daddy." The word filled the air, drowning out everything else in the bar. Brock felt a warmth spread through his chest, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Those 3 little voices saying that one simple word meant more to him than all the respect and fear he'd earned in his previous life. He gathered the girls close, not caring who saw the moisture in his eyes. In that moment, the judgment of his old friends meant nothing. The sneers and whispers faded away. He wasn't Iron Montgomery anymore, the feared enforcer of the Hells Angels. He was simply Daddy, and that was everything he ever needed to be. Brock was finishing up the dishes when 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. The sound was different from the usual friendly neighbor visits, more demanding, more threatening. His instincts, honed from years on the streets, told him something wasn't right. "Girls, stay in the backyard," he called through the kitchen window, watching his daughters playing on the swing set he'd built last summer. They waved back, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension building in his shoulders. He opened the front door to find Vinnie Viper Rizzo standing there, leather vest adorned with familiar patches, a cruel smile playing on his weathered face. Brock's jaw tightened. He hadn't seen Vinnie in over 20 years, not since he'd walked away from the club. Well, the mighty Iron Montgomery?" Vinnie drawled, pushing past Brock into the house. "Nice place you got here." "Very," Domestic. Brock closed the door, keeping his voice low. What do you want, Vinnie? Can an old friend stop by? Vinnie picked up a framed photo of the girls from the side table. Sweet little family you've got. Would be a shame if anything happened to disrupt it. Brock snatched the photo from Vinnie's hands, placing it face down. Say what you came to say. The club needs you back, Iron. Things aren't what they used to be. We're losing territory, losing respect. Vinnie's fake smile disappeared. You owe us. You can't just walk away and play house forever. I don't owe anyone anything, Brock growled. I paid my dues. I'm done. Vinnie's eyes narrowed. Nobody's ever done. You know that. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The club voted. Either you come back, or we make things difficult. Real difficult. Through the window, Brock could hear his daughter's laughter. The sound made his heart ache with fear and determination. I'm not that person anymore, Brock said firmly. Find someone else. You think you can just erase 20 years of brotherhood? Vinnie spat. You've got 1 week to reconsider. After that. He glanced toward the backyard. Well, let's just say your peaceful little life might not stay so peaceful. Brock's fists clenched at his sides. Every fiber of his being wanted to throw Vinnie through the wall. But he knew better. Violence would only prove Vinnie right. That the old iron was still there, just beneath the surface. Get out, Brock said, his voice deadly calm. And don't ever come near my family again. Vinnie laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the living room. 1 week, Iron. Don't make me come back here. Brock followed Vinnie to the door, watching as he strode down the front path. The rumble of a motorcycle engine shattered the afternoon quiet. From the porch, Brock could see his daughters still playing, their world still innocent and untouched by the darkness that had just invaded their home. Tiana was pushing Maya on the swing while Sania built a castle in the sandbox. They were completely unaware of the threat that now loomed over their happy home, the danger that had followed their father from his past life. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Brock packed cereal bowls into a cardboard box. His movements were careful, methodical, trying to keep the noise down while his girls still slept upstairs. Each dish wrapped in newspaper reminded him of countless breakfast conversations, of milk-splashed giggles and sleepy good mornings. The house felt different now, hollow somehow. Most of their belongings were already packed away in boxes stacked against the walls. The familiar photos had been taken down, leaving pale rectangles on the faded wallpaper. Only the essentials remained: 3 small beds upstairs, a kitchen table, and the few toys the girls couldn't bear to pack away just yet. Footsteps padded down the stairs, and Tiana appeared in her favorite unicorn pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. At 7 years old, she was already showing signs of being the thoughtful one. Daddy, why are you up so early? Brock set down the newspaper-wrapped plate and opened his arms. She ran to him, burying her face in his worn t-shirt. Just getting an early start, princess. Is Maya still snoring? Tiana giggled. Like a baby bear, Sania too. He lifted her onto the counter, her little legs dangling. Listen, sweetheart. I need to tell you something important. Can you be my big girl? She nodded solemnly, her dark curls bouncing. We're going to move to a new house, in a different town. He kept his voice gentle, watching her face carefully. It's a nice place, with a bigger backyard for you and your sisters to play in. But what about my school? And Miss Thompson? And the swing set you built? Her bottom lip trembled slightly. Before Brock could answer, 2 more sets of footsteps thundered down the stairs. Maya and Sania burst into the kitchen, still in their matching pajamas. What's happening? Sania asked, always quick to sense when something was different. Brock gathered them all close, these 3 precious lives that had changed everything. We're going on an adventure, he explained, trying to make it sound exciting rather than scary. To a new house in a place called Cedar Grove. It's not too far away, but it's going to be our fresh start. Will there be other kids there? Maya asked, clutching her stuffed elephant. Lots of them, Brock assured her, and a park right down the street. The girls exchanged looks, having one of those silent conversations that only triplets seemed capable of. Finally, Sania spoke up. Is it because of the scary man who came to visit? Brock's heart clenched. Of course they had noticed. They noticed everything. Sometimes, he said carefully, grown-ups need to make hard decisions to keep their families safe. Do you trust Daddy? 3 heads nodded without hesitation. Then trust that this move is the right thing for us. We'll be together, and that's what matters most. The girls hugged him tight, their small arms barely reaching around his broad chest. They didn't fully understand, but their faith in him was absolute, unconditional. It made his throat tight with emotion. Together, they spent the morning packing the last of their belongings. The girls made a game of it, racing to see who could fill their boxes the fastest. Brock watched them play, their laughter echoing through the increasingly empty house. Even in this moment of upheaval, they found joy. As he loaded the final boxes into the moving truck, Brock looked back at the only home his daughters had ever known. The swing set stood silent in the backyard, a reminder of simpler times. He thought of Vinnie's threat, of the danger lurking in the shadows of his past. The girls waited in the car, watching him with trusting eyes. The years melted away like snow in spring. Brock watched his daughters grow from wobbling toddlers into bright-eyed grade schoolers, their personalities blooming like wildflowers in summer. The small house in Cedar Grove became their sanctuary, filled with the kind of joy he never thought possible in his previous life. Every morning, Brock would wake before dawn to make their lunches. His large hands, once known for their fighting strength, now carefully cut the crusts off sandwiches just the way the girls liked them. He'd pack little notes in their lunchboxes. Simple things like, "Have a good day," or "Daddy loves you," written in his rough handwriting. The kitchen table became their gathering place. Homework spread across its worn surface, art projects that Maya insisted on displaying, and Sanaya's collection of rocks she found fascinating. Tiana would often sit there long after dinner, reading her books while Brock did the dishes, comfortable in their shared silence. Their routines became sacred. Sunday morning pancakes, where Brock would attempt to make shapes, requested by the girls. "Make mine a dolphin," Maya would beg, while Sanaya preferred stars, and Tiana always asked for hearts. Most times the pancakes looked nothing like what they were supposed to be, but the girls would clap and cheer anyway. He never missed a parent-teacher conference, sitting uncomfortably in those small plastic chairs meant for children, his leather jacket creaking as he leaned forward to hear about his daughter's progress. The teacher's initial wariness of his tattooed appearance always melted away when they saw how attentive he was, how he wrote down every detail about his girls' achievements and struggles. Through elementary school, he taught them to ride bikes, running alongside each girl until they found their balance. He bandaged scraped knees, dried tears, and checked under beds for monsters. His hands, which once knew only how to make fists, learned to braid hair and tie ribbons. The middle school years brought new challenges. Brock navigated through first crushes, friendship drama, and the beginning of teenage attitudes. He learned to bite his tongue when Sanaya slammed her door in frustration, to comfort Maya when she didn't make the dance team, to listen when Tiana worried about fitting in. Now, as Brock stood in the kitchen doorway, the girls sat at the dinner table, their homework pushed aside. At 15, they were shadows of the women they would become. Maya sketched in her notebook while telling a story about her art class, her free spirit evident in her paint-stained fingers and the colorful beads braided into her hair. Sania, practical as always, organized her chemistry notes between bites of lasagna, while Tiana listened to both sisters, offering encouraging words and gentle teasing. Their laughter filled the room, a sound that still amazed him after all these years. They had his dark hair and strong features, but their spirits were entirely their own. Maya's creativity, Sania's determination, Tiana's compassion. These were qualities that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with who they had chosen to become. Pride swelled in his chest as he watched them. These three remarkable young women who had transformed his life. Yet beneath that pride lurked a familiar fear. Even after all these years, he couldn't shake the weight of his past. Every unexpected knock at the door, every unfamiliar car that drove by too slowly, they all reminded him of what he left behind and what he stood to lose. The girls continued their conversation, unaware of their father's thoughts as they shared inside jokes and stories from their day. Their bond with each other was as strong as their bond with him. And watching them together like this, Brock felt both grateful and afraid. Grateful for the family they had become, and afraid of anything that might threaten it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Brock's driveway as he stepped out to collect the mail. The familiar routine felt different today, heavier somehow. Among the usual bills and junk mail, a plain white envelope caught his eye. No return address, just his name, scrawled in messy handwriting he hadn't seen in years but would never forget. His hands trembled slightly as he tore open the envelope, the paper rough against his calloused fingers. Inside, a single sheet of paper carried words that made his blood run cold. Iron. Time's up on Playing House. The Brotherhood needs you back. You owe us, and it's time to pay up. Those pretty little girls of yours. It would be a shame if anything happened to them. You've got 1 week to contact me, or things get ugly. Brock's jaw clenched, his fingers crushing the paper. The morning air suddenly felt thick and hard to breathe. From inside the house, he could hear the girls getting ready for school. Maya singing along to some pop song. Sanaya complaining about a missing textbook, Tiana mediating between them. He quickly stuffed the letter into his jacket pocket as the front door swung open. Tiana emerged first, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad, you okay?" she asked, noticing his rigid posture. Brock forced his features to relax, managing a small smile. "Just bills," he said, holding up the remaining envelopes. "You girls ready for school?" Maya bounced out next, her art portfolio nearly knocking over a potted plant. "Ready. Can we stop for breakfast sandwiches? Please?" "Got a big test today," Sania added, following close behind. "Need brain food," Brock nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Sure thing, sweethearts." His voice sounded normal enough, but inside, his mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. During the drive to school, he watched his daughters in the rearview mirror. They chatted about their plans for the day, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Maya gestured wildly as she described her latest art project. Sania quoted chemistry facts she'd memorized for her test. Tiana smiled at both of them, occasionally catching his eye in the mirror with a look that reminded him so much of their mother. At the drive-thru, he ordered their usual favorites: egg and cheese for Maya, sausage and hash brown for Sania, vegetarian wrap for Tiana. His own stomach churned too much to eat. Dropping them off at school, he watched them walk away. 3 dark heads bobbing through the crowd of students. His chest tightened. These girls were his whole world, the reason he'd left his old life behind. Now, that life threatened to destroy everything he'd built. Back home, Brock sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out before him. The words seemed to pulse on the page, each one a reminder of the violence and darkness he'd tried to leave behind. His fingers traced the tattoo on his forearm, faded now, but still visible. The mark of a brotherhood he'd once believed in. He couldn't tell the girls. They'd never known the full truth about his past, and he wanted to keep it that way. Better they think of him as just their dad, the guy who made them pancakes on Sundays and checked their homework, not someone who once rode with one of the most notorious motorcycle gangs in the country. Carefully folding the letter, he tucked it into his wallet, the weight of it pressed against his leg like a burning coal. As the day wore on, he found himself growing quieter, more distant. When the girls came home from school, full of stories and laughter, he managed only brief responses, his mind consumed with the ticking clock of Vinnie's ultimatum. Sania sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers and printouts. Her laptop glowed in the dim light as she methodically searched through local business records. Something about Vinnie's name had sparked her memory when she overheard her father talking on the phone last week. The clock on her nightstand showed 11:42 p.m. Her sisters were already asleep, but Sanaya couldn't rest. Not when she knew their father was carrying such a heavy burden. She'd noticed how he'd grown more withdrawn lately, his usual quiet demeanor turning into something more troubled. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing dates and names. Then something caught her eye. There it was, Vinnie Rizzo's name, buried in an article about local business permits. He was listed as a silent partner in the River Street storage facility. "That's weird," Sania mumbled, leaning closer to the screen. The storage facility. He had been in the news recently. Something about suspicious activities and potential criminal investigations. She clicked through more articles, her heart beginning to race. Police reports mentioned the facility in connection with several ongoing investigations. Then she found it. A document someone had uploaded to a local news blog. It was a business contract, poorly redacted, showing Vinnie's signature alongside details of questionable transactions. Sanaya's hands trembled as she read through the document. The numbers didn't add up, large sums of money moving through shell companies, all connected to that storage facility. This wasn't just bad business. This was evidence of something illegal. She grabbed her phone and took photos of the screen, saving everything she could find. Her mind raced with the implications. This could be what they needed to keep Vinnie away from their father. A floorboard creaked outside her door. Sania quickly minimized her browser window just as Maya poked her head in. "You're still up?" Maya asked, rubbing her eyes. "It's almost midnight." I need to show you something, Sania said, her voice low. But we need Tiana too. Minutes later, the three sisters huddled on Sania's bed, the laptop screen illuminating their worried faces as she explained what she'd found. Look at these numbers, Sania pointed to the contract. This storage facility is just a front. Vinnie's using it for something illegal, and I bet the police are already investigating. Tiana leaned forward, her brow furrowed. This could help Dad? Keep Vinnie away from him? Maybe, Sania nodded. But I need to dig deeper, find more proof. If we can connect all the dots. It could be dangerous, Maya whispered, clutching a pillow to her chest. If Vinnie finds out we're looking into his business. I know, Sania admitted. But we have to do something. Dad's been protecting us our whole lives. Now it's our turn to protect him. The sisters looked at each other, years of shared understanding passing between them. They'd always known their father had secrets, had always sensed the shadow of his past lingering around their family. Now they had a chance to fight back. I'm in, Tiana said firmly. Whatever you need. Me too, Maya added, her voice stronger now. We do this together. Sania felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked at her sisters. We'll need to be careful. Really careful. But if we can find enough evidence, then we can stop Vinnie, Tiana finished, and keep Dad safe. The three sisters clasped hands, making a silent pact. They would protect their father, just as he had always protected them. The summer heat pressed down on Brock as he worked in the garage, his muscles straining as he lifted heavy boxes of auto parts. Sweat dripped from his forehead, and his breathing felt heavier than usual. He paused, leaning against his workbench, trying to catch his breath. Something wasn't right. The pressure in his chest had been building all morning, but he'd ignored it, chalking it up to the heat and hard work. That's what tough guys did. They pushed through the pain. The wrench he was holding clattered to the floor as a sharp pain shot through his left arm. His vision blurred, and the familiar walls of his automotive shop seemed to tilt sideways. The pressure in his chest became unbearable, like a giant fist squeezing his heart. Hey, boss? Jimmy, one of his mechanics, called from across the garage. You okay? Brock tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. His knees buckled, and the concrete floor rushed up to meet him. The last thing he heard was Jimmy shouting for someone to call 911. The hospital room was too white, too sterile. Brock hated hospitals. They reminded him of weakness, of vulnerability. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, stood at the foot of his bed, reviewing his chart. Mr. Montgomery, she began, her voice serious but gentle. The tests show significant blockage in your coronary arteries. You've had what we call a minor heart attack, but it's a warning sign of a more serious condition. Brock's jaw tightened. Just tell me straight, Doc. You need bypass surgery, she said. The blockages are severe enough that medication alone won't be sufficient. Without the surgery, you're at risk for a major heart attack, one you might not survive. The words hit him like a physical blow. Surgery meant being helpless, dependent. It meant letting others see him weak. The thought made his stomach turn. How long can I wait? He asked, his voice gruff. The doctor's expression grew stern. This isn't something you should delay, Mr. Montgomery. The sooner we operate, the better your chances. I need time to think about it, he insisted. You should discuss this with your family, she advised. Your daughters would want to know. No. Brock cut her off sharply. They don't need to know about this. Not yet. The doctor looked like she wanted to argue but simply nodded. I'll have the nurse bring you the paperwork with more information about the procedure. Please, don't wait too long to make your decision. After she left, Brock stared out the window at the parking lot below. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the girls. They must have heard he'd left work early. He'd tell them he had a touch of heat exhaustion, nothing serious. They didn't need to worry about their old man falling apart. He typed out a quick message. Everything's fine. Just needed some rest. See you at dinner. The lie felt bitter in his mouth, but he couldn't bear the thought of his daughters seeing him like this, hooked up to machines, facing his mortality. They'd already lost so much in their lives. He wouldn't burden them with this too. His chest ached, and this time he wasn't sure if it was from his heart condition or the weight of his pride. Deep down, a voice whispered that he was running out of time, that he needed help. But Brock Montgomery had never been good at asking for help, and he wasn't about to start now. The kitchen table had never felt so small. Tiana, Sania, and Maya sat across from their father, their dinner plates untouched. The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the slow tick of the clock on the wall. Tiana, always the most diplomatic of the three, spoke first. "Dad, we need to talk about what happened at the garage." Brock's jaw tightened as he pushed his mashed potatoes around his plate. "Nothing happened. Just got a little overheated, that's all." "Jimmy called us," Sania cut in, her voice firm. "He told us everything. About how you collapsed, about the ambulance." Maya reached across the table, trying to take her father's hand, but he pulled away. "Daddy, please. We're worried about you." "There's nothing to worry about," Brock insisted, his voice gruff. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." Tiana's voice cracked with emotion. "We see how you're struggling, the way you can't catch your breath after climbing the stairs, how you hold your chest when you think we're not looking." Brock turned away, facing the kitchen window. His broad shoulders seemed to sag under an invisible weight. "I said I'm handling it." Sanaya stood up, moving to stand in front of him. At 28, she had inherited his stubborn streak. "Like you handled it today? By collapsing at work? That's enough," he growled, but the usual authority in his voice was missing. "No, it's not enough." Maya joined in, tears streaming down her face. "We can't just watch you kill yourself because you're too proud to get help." The words hit Brock like a physical blow. He gripped the kitchen counter, his knuckles turning white. The girls could see the internal struggle playing across his weathered face. "I'm your father," he said quietly. "It's my job to protect you, not the other way around." "And who's going to protect us if something happens to?" Tiana asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Dad, letting us help you doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Brock's shoulders began to shake. For a moment, the girls thought he was angry, until they heard a sound they'd never heard before. Their father was crying. The sight of their strong, stoic father breaking down hit them hard. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared of leaving you girls alone. There are things, dangers from my past that could come back. If something happens to me, who's going to keep you safe?" The sisters exchanged glances, then moved as one to surround their father. Maya wrapped her arms around his waist, while Tiana and Sania each took one of his hands. "We're not little girls anymore, Dad," Sania said softly. "We're strong because you made us strong. And we'll always be there for you," Tiana added, squeezing his hand. "Just like you've always been there for us." "Please," Maya pleaded, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Let us help you. Let the doctors help you." Brock looked down at his daughters, his brave, beautiful girls who had grown into such remarkable women. For the first time, he allowed himself to lean on them, to accept their strength alongside his own. The doorbell rang just as Brock finished cleaning up the dinner dishes. His daughters had gone upstairs to study, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he caught sight of a familiar motorcycle parked in his driveway, a chrome-plated Harley with red pinstripes. His heart skipped a beat. Vinnie Viper Rizzo. Brock's hands trembled as he opened the door. There stood Vinnie, still wearing his leather cut with the hellsangels patches, a cruel smile playing on his weathered face. Two younger club members flanked him, their faces hard and unfamiliar. "Been a while, Iron," Vinnie said, using Brock's old road name. "Mind if we step inside?" It wasn't really a question. Brock glanced upstairs, grateful the girls were out of sight. He stepped aside, letting them in. "What do you want, Vinnie?" Brock's voice was low and controlled, masking the fear churning in his gut. Vinnie walked around the living room, running his finger along the family photos on the mantel. He picked up one of the girls at their high school graduation. "Nice little family you've got here. Real touching how you traded in your brothers for these pretty little daughters. Leave them out of this." Brock's fists clenched at his sides. Vinnie set the photo down and turned to face him. "Here's the thing, Iron. The club's getting heat from rivals up north. We need our old enforcer back. You were the best at keeping people in line. I'm done with that life," Brock said firmly, though his chest tightened with each word. "See, that's where you're wrong." Vinnie's smile disappeared. "Nobody's ever done with the life. You're either in or you're dead. And right now, you're floating somewhere in between." One of the younger members cracked his knuckles menacingly. Brock felt sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm giving you one last chance," Vinnie continued. "Come back to the club, do what needs to be done, or..." He picked up another photo, this one showing the girls at the beach last summer. "Well, Let's just say those pretty daughters of yours might find out exactly what kind of man their daddy used to be. Brock's vision blurred with rage. If you touch them, you'll what? Vinnie laughed. Kill me? That would just prove my point. Violence is in your blood, Iron. Always has been, always will be. He set the photo down and headed for the door. You've got 48 hours to decide. Either you're back in, or everything you love burns. The three men left, the sound of motorcycles roaring to life breaking the evening quiet. Brock collapsed onto his couch, his heart racing dangerously fast. The medication the doctor prescribed sat untouched on his kitchen counter. He couldn't afford to be foggy. Not now. His hands shook as he ran them through his graying hair. The life he'd built, the peace he'd found, it was all slipping away. He could hear his daughters laughing upstairs, completely unaware of the danger that had just walked through their front door. For the first time in years, Brock felt completely powerless. His past wasn't just catching up to him anymore. It was threatening to destroy everything he held dear. He looked at the family photos Vinnie had touched, seeing them now as targets rather than memories. The walls seemed to close in around him. His chest ached. Whether from fear or his condition, he couldn't tell. How could he protect his girls from this? How could he keep them safe when his very presence put them in danger? The Montgomery house had always been filled with laughter and warmth, but now a heavy silence hung in the air like a thick fog. At the dinner table, the usual chatter was replaced by the quiet clinking of forks against plates. Brock barely touched his food, pushing it around listlessly while avoiding his daughter's concerned glances. Tiana, always the most sensitive of the three, watched her father's hands trembling as he lifted his water glass. Dad, you need to eat something, she said softly. Please? Brock just shook his head, his jaw tight. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his normally strong frame seemed somehow smaller, more fragile. The medication bottles on the kitchen counter remained unopened, a visible reminder of his stubborn refusal to acknowledge his condition. Sania exchanged worried looks with her sisters. She'd noticed their father checking the windows more frequently, jumping at unexpected sounds. The tough man who had raised them was disappearing before their eyes, replaced by someone haunted and afraid. Maybe we should watch a movie together tonight, Maya suggested, trying to inject some normalcy into their evening. Like we used to? Not tonight, Brock mumbled, pushing away from the table. I need to check some things in the garage. The girls watched him leave, his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. As soon as the door closed behind him, Sania slammed her hand on the table in frustration. This isn't right, she said, her voice tight with emotion. He's killing himself trying to protect us from whatever's going on. Maya reached for her sister's hand. I heard him up again last night, pacing. He barely sleeps anymore. And he won't take his heart medication, Tiana added, glancing at the untouched bottles. The doctor said it was serious, but he acts like it's nothing. Outside, they could hear their father's heavy footsteps as he made another circuit around the house, checking locks and peering into shadows. The sound of his labored breathing carried through the open window. Remember when we were little? Maya asked, her voice soft with memory. How he'd spend hours playing tea party with us, even though he could barely fit in those tiny chairs. Tiana wiped at her eyes. Or how he learned to braid our hair. Even though his hands were so big he kept getting tangled up. He was always there for us, Sanaya said firmly. Now it's our turn to be there for him, whether he likes it or not. The sisters sat in silence for a moment, listening to their father's movements outside. Through the window, they could see him leaning against the garage wall, one hand pressed to his chest, fighting to catch his breath. We can't just watch him destroy himself, Tiana whispered. We won't, Sanaya replied, her determination evident in her voice. Dad's always tried to protect us by keeping us in the dark, but we're not little girls anymore. Maya nodded, her usual carefree expression replaced by resolve. Whatever's happening, whatever he's afraid of, he doesn't have to face it alone. The sisters looked at each other, years of shared understanding passing between them. Their father had given them everything, had shaped their lives with his love and protection. Now he was the one who needed protecting, even if he couldn't see it himself. Through the window, they watched as Brock straightened up, tried to square his shoulders, and continued his patrol of the property. His daughters' hearts ached at the sight of their strong father reduced to this shadow of himself, but their determination only grew stronger. The time for waiting was over. They needed to act, with or without their father's blessing. Sania sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by stacks of papers and newspaper clippings. Her laptop screen glowed in the dim light, displaying financial records she'd managed to obtain through careful research. Maya and Tiana huddled around her, their faces tense with concentration. "Look at this," Senia whispered, pointing to a document. "Vinnie's name keeps showing up in connection with these shell companies, and they all lead back to that warehouse district downtown." Tiana leaned closer, her brow furrowed. Do you even find all this?" "I've been tracking his movements," Senia explained, pulling up another document. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, he meets with these men at the Blue Harbor Diner. They're not just having coffee, they're exchanging something." Maya picked up one of the newspaper clippings. "And you're sure these missing shipments are connected to him?" "Positive." Senia pulled out her phone, showing them photos she'd discreetly taken. "See these trucks? They match the ones reported stolen last month. But they're not stolen. They're being used to move something illegal." The sisters fell silent as they heard their father's heavy footsteps pass by the door. They waited until the sound faded before continuing their conversation. "We have enough here to go to the police," Tiana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This could put Vinnie away for a long time." Maya shook her head, her usual cheerful expression replaced by worry. "But what if he retaliates? He knows where we live, and Dad's not well enough to." "That's exactly why we have to do something," Senia interrupted. "Look at what this is doing to Dad. He can barely sleep. He's not taking his medication, and his heart condition is getting worse." Tiana gathered some of the papers, organizing them carefully. "We need to be smart about this. One wrong move and everything could backfire." The girls jumped as they heard a crash from downstairs, followed by their father's muffled coughing. They listened intently until they heard him moving around again, their hearts heavy with concern. "I found something else," Senia said, pulling out a final document. "Vinnie's been laundering money through that new construction project on 5th Street. The numbers don't add up, and I've traced irregular deposits to offshore accounts." Maya's eyes widened. "That's why he's so desperate to get Dad back in. He needs someone he can trust to help run the operation." "And Dad would never agree to that," Tiana added. "Not after everything he's done to build a clean life for us." The sisters gathered closer, their heads nearly touching as they examined the evidence spread before them. Years of growing up together had taught them to read each other's thoughts, and now they moved with synchronized purpose. "We need to protect Dad," Senia said firmly. "He's spent his whole life protecting us. Now it's our turn." Tiana nodded, her gentle nature hardening with resolve. "We have enough evidence here to expose everything Vinnie's been doing. But we have to be careful," Maya reminded them. "We can't let Dad know what we're planning. He'd try to stop us." The sisters looked at each other, years of shared understanding passing between them. They'd grown up watching their father battle his demons alone, too proud or too scared to ask for help. But they weren't helpless children anymore. "Together?" Senia asked, holding out her hand. "Together," her sisters echoed, placing their hands on top of hers. They began sorting through the evidence, organizing it into a clear case against Vinnie. Their father's footsteps continued to pace downstairs, but soon, they silently promised, he wouldn't have to carry this burden alone. The evening started like any other. Brock sat in his worn leather armchair, pretending to watch TV while his mind raced with worries about Vinnie and his daughter's safety. His chest had been feeling tight all day, but he brushed it off as stress. The girls were in their rooms upstairs, and the house was quiet except for the low murmur of the television. The first wave of pain hit him like a hammer to the chest. Brock clutched at his shirt, his breathing becoming labored. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The room started to spin, and he knocked over the side table, sending his glass of water crashing to the floor. "Dad?" Maya called from upstairs. "Everything okay down there?" Brock tried to answer, but only a strangled gasp escaped his lips. The pain intensified, spreading down his left arm. His vision blurred, and he slumped forward in his chair. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Senia reached him first, her eyes widening at the sight of her father's pale, sweat-soaked face. "Dad!" she screamed, rushing to his side. "Tiana, call 911. Maya, get his medication." Tiana already had her phone out, her voice trembling as she spoke to the emergency operator. "My father's having a heart attack. He's conscious but in severe pain. Please hurry." Maya ran to the kitchen, frantically searching through the cabinet where Brock kept his heart medication. She found the bottle, nearly full, evidence of his stubborn refusal to take care of himself. Senia held her father's hand, trying to keep him conscious. His grip was weak, his skin clammy. "Stay with us, Dad. Please, just stay with us." "The ambulance is coming," Tiana announced, kneeling beside them. They said to keep him sitting upright and try to keep him calm. Brock's eyes were filled with fear, not for himself but for his daughters. Even now he tried to speak, to warn them about Vinnie, about the danger they were in. But the words wouldn't come. The wail of sirens grew closer. Maya ran to open the front door, waving frantically at the approaching ambulance. The paramedics rushed in with their equipment, quickly assessing Brock's condition. "Blood pressure's dangerously high," one paramedic announced. "We need to move him now." The girls watched helplessly as their father was lifted onto a stretcher. His massive frame, usually so strong and imposing, looked vulnerable under the harsh glare of the emergency lights. "We're coming with him," Sania declared, grabbing her father's jacket and keys. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. The girls huddled together in Tiana's car as they followed the ambulance, each lost in their own thoughts but united in their fear. At the hospital, doctors whisked Brock away for immediate treatment, leaving the sisters in the cold, sterile waiting room. A nurse approached them with forms to fill out, her face sympathetic. "Your father's in critical condition," she explained gently. "The next few hours will be crucial." The sisters sat together, hands clasped tightly. Their father, who had always been their protector, their rock, now lay fighting for his life behind those hospital doors. The weight of everything, Vinnie's threats, their father's illness, the evidence they'd gathered, pressed down on them with crushing force. "We can't wait any longer," Sania whispered, her voice firm despite her tears. "We have to do something about Vinnie now, before it's too late." Maya and Tiana nodded, their faces set with determination. Their father had sacrificed everything to give them a safe, loving home. Now it was their turn to fight for him. The waiting room felt suffocating, its stark white walls closing in as the sisters huddled together. Their father lay in intensive care, fighting for his life, while they prepared to face the very danger he'd tried to protect them from. "He's at the Rusty Nail," Sania said, clutching a manila envelope filled with documents. "That's where he always meets his people." Tiana gripped the steering wheel tighter as they pulled into the bar's parking lot. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting an eerie red glow across their faces. Maya's hand trembled as she checked her phone, making sure their backup recording was working. "Remember," Sanaya whispered, "we stick together, no matter what." The bar's heavy door creaked open, and cigarette smoke hit them like a wall. Heads turned, rough-looking men in leather vests, their eyes narrowing at the sight of 3 young women entering their domain. In the corner booth sat Vinnie Viper Rizzo, nursing a drink. His snake-like eyes widened slightly as the girls approached. Well, Montgomery's little princesses." He gestured to the empty seats. "Where's Daddy, dearest?" "In the hospital," Tiana said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Having emergency surgery because of the stress you've put him under." Vinnie's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Shame about that, but your old man made his choice when he turned his back on his brothers." Sanaya slapped the envelope on the table. "We know about your operation at Wilson's warehouse. The shipments, the money laundering, everything." For a split second, Vinnie's mask slipped. His face darkened as he leaned forward. "You girls are playing a very dangerous game." "No," Maya spoke up, her artistic soul giving way to steel. "You're the one playing games. We have copies of everything. If anything happens to our father, or us, it all goes to the FBI." Vinnie's hand shot out, grabbing Sania's wrist. Before he could speak, Tiana's phone appeared, recording. "That'll make great evidence of assault," she said coldly. The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see how Vinnie would handle these 3 girls who dared to challenge him. "You think you can threaten me?" Vinnie growled, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. "We're not threatening," Sania replied, pulling her wrist free. "We're promising. Leave our father alone. Leave us alone, or everything we have goes public." Maya opened her phone, showing a screen full of documents. "We've got it all backed up. Multiple locations. Multiple people ready to release everything if we don't check in daily." Vinnie sat back, studying each sister in turn. The muscle in his jaw twitched. These weren't the little girls he'd expected. They were their father's daughters, showing the same iron will that had made Brock Iron Montgomery legendary. "You've got guts," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "But this isn't over." For now, it is, Tiana stated firmly. Our father chose us over your brotherhood. Deal with it. The sisters stood together, presenting an efes. United front. Vinnie watched them leave, his expression unreadable. Outside, they hurried to their car, hands shaking as the adrenaline wore off. Back at the hospital, they found their father's condition unchanged. Critical but stable, the doctors said. The girls settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, exhausted but vigilant. He'll be mad, we confronted Vinnie, Maya whispered. He'll be alive to be mad, Sania replied, squeezing her sister's hands. That's what matters. They watched the sun rise through the hospital windows, knowing that while they'd won this battle, their father's life still hung in the balance. Vinnie's threat lingered like smoke in their minds, but they'd shown him, and themselves, that they weren't helpless. They were Montgomery's, and they protected their own. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the hospital room as Brock opened his eyes. Sunlight filtered through the window blinds, casting thin stripes across his bed. His chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a boulder on it, but the crushing pain from before had subsided. Tiana sat in a chair beside him, her head resting on the edge of his bed as she dozed. Sanaya and Maya were curled up together on the small couch beneath the window. The sight of his daughters brought a lump to his throat. They hadn't left his side since he'd been admitted. Dad? Tiana stirred, lifting her head. Her eyes lit up when she saw him awake. Girls, he's up! Her sisters jumped to their feet, rushing to the bedside. Brock tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and scratchy. Here, Maya said, helping him sip water through a straw. Her gentle touch reminded him of how he used to feed them their bottles as babies. How long? He managed to whisper. 3 days, Sania answered, adjusting his pillow. The doctors said you had a major heart attack. They had to do emergency surgery. Her voice cracked slightly. We almost lost you, Dad. Brock closed his eyes, feeling the taste, a weight of their worry. He'd always been the strong one, the protector. Now here he was, weak as a kitten, being cared for by the very people he was supposed to protect. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I should have listened when you told me to get help. You're the most stubborn man we know, Tiana said, wiping away a tear. But we're just glad you're still here. The girls exchanged glances, and Brock noticed something pass between them, a shared secret or concern. What is it? He asked, knowing his daughters well enough to sense when they were holding something back. Maya took his hand, her artist's fingers gentle against his calloused palm. Dad, while you were in surgery, we took care of the Vinnie situation. Brock's heart monitor beeped faster. What did you do? The girls explained everything. The evidence they'd gathered, their confrontation at the Rusty Nail, the ultimatum they'd given Vinnie. With each word, Brock felt a mixture of terror at what could have happened and overwhelming pride at their courage. You could have been hurt, he said, his voice trembling. If anything had happened to you. That's exactly how we feel about you, Dad, Sanaya said firmly. We couldn't just sit by and watch you destroy yourself trying to protect us. We're a family. We protect each other. Brock looked at his daughters, really looked at them, not as the little girls he'd adopted all those years ago, but as the strong, capable women they'd become. They'd risked everything to save him, not just from Vinnie, but from his own stubborn pride. His eyes welled with tears, something his daughters had rarely seen. I can't do this alone anymore, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I had to be strong for you girls, but you're the ones who've been strong for me. That's what family does, Maya said softly. I'm so proud of you, Brock said, squeezing Maya's hand. All of you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for not giving up on your old man. The girls gathered around him, careful of the tubes and wires, sharing a gentle group hug. For the first time in years, Brock felt truly vulnerable, but also truly safe. His daughters had become his lifeline, his strength, his salvation. The hospital room door burst open, making Tiana jump. 2 burly men in leather vests stood in the doorway, their expressions dark and threatening. She recognized the hellsangels patches on their jackets. Message from Vinnie. One of them growled, taking a step forward. He says time's running out. Sanaya moved to stand between them and Brock's bed. Despite her racing heart, her voice remained steady. Get out. This is a hospital. The second man sneered. Better listen to the boss, or things might get real unpleasant for your family. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the nurse call button, but she kept her chin high. We're not afraid of you or Vinnie. Brock tried to sit up in his bed, his face contorted with pain and anger. Leave my daughters alone, he said, his voice weak but filled with fury. The first man laughed. Look at you now, Iron. Can't even protect your own kids. He took another menacing step forward. Security to room 415, a calm voice announced over the intercom. Maya had pressed the button without anyone noticing. The thugs exchanged glances, clearly not expecting resistance. This ain't over. The second one spat before they backed out of the room. After they left, Tiana's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair. They're not going to stop, are they? Sanaya paced the room, her mind racing. No, but maybe we can use this. She pulled out her phone, showing her sisters the photos she'd secretly taken of the men. We've got their faces now, and the security cameras must have caught them too. The evidence we have on Vinnie's illegal operations, Maya added, understanding dawning on her face. If we combine it with this intimidation attempt, Tiana straightened in her chair. We need to take this to the police, all of it. The documents about the money laundering through that bar, the threats, everything. Girls, Brock said weakly from his bed. It's too dangerous. But the sisters weren't listening. They huddled together, forming a plan. Sania would compile all the evidence they'd gathered. Maya would get the security footage from the hospital. Tiana would contact Detective Martinez, who'd helped them before when they'd reported the initial threats. We're done being scared, Sania declared, looking at her father. Vinnie thinks he can intimidate us because we're just 3 girls. He has no idea who he's dealing with. We're Montgomerys, Maya added firmly, and Montgomerys don't back down. Tiana pulled out a manila envelope from her bag, spreading its contents across the small hospital table. Look at what we have. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Witness statements from people at the Rusty Nail about drug deals. Photos of those meetings Vinnie thought were secret. And now proof that he's sending thugs to threaten people in a hospital, Sania added, her phone displaying the photos she'd just taken. The girls worked quickly, organizing their evidence. They knew they had to move fast before Vinnie could retaliate. Their hands shook slightly as they handled the documents, but their determination never wavered. Detective Martinez said she's been building a case against Vinnie for months, Tiana said, dialing the number. This might be exactly what she needs to bring him down. From his bed, Brock watched his daughters with a mixture of fear and pride. They were no longer the helpless babies he'd adopted all those years ago. They were strong, brave women who refused to let anyone threaten their family. The girls finished gathering their evidence, ready to take the next step. This was it. Their chance to end Vinnie's reign of terror once and for all. They were scared, but they had each other, and that made them unstoppable. Brock adjusted his leather jacket, feeling its familiar weight on his shoulders. His heart was strong now, healed after months of recovery. Through the window of their home, he watched his daughters loading evidence into Tiana's car. Their determination filled him with a mix of pride and concern. You don't have to come with me, he said as they walked back inside. I can handle Vinnie. Sanaya shook her head, her eyes fierce. We're family, Dad. We do this together. Besides, Maya added, we've got Detective Martinez and her team backing us up. She patted the manila envelope tucked under her arm, filled with damning evidence against Vinnie. They had arranged to meet Vinnie at the Rusty Nail, his favorite bar. It was neutral ground, and more importantly, the police would be watching. Detective Martinez had positioned her officers strategically around the building. The drive was tense. Brock's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The girls sat quietly in the back, each lost in their own thoughts. They had come so far from those 3 baby girls he'd adopted years ago. The Rusty Nail's neon sign buzzed in the afternoon sun. Several motorcycles were parked outside, their chrome glinting. Brock recognized them. Vinnie's crew was already here. Remember the plan, Tiana whispered as they walked toward the entrance. We just need to get him talking. Inside, the bar was dim and smoky. Vinnie sat at a corner booth, flanked by 2 of his men, the same ones who had threatened them at the hospital. His snake tattoo seemed to writhe on his neck as he smiled coldly. Well, Vinnie drawled. The whole happy family. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Brock. Looking better. Iron. Ready to come back where you belong. Brock stepped forward, his daughters close behind him. It's over, Vinnie. We know about everything. The money laundering, the drug deals, all of it. Vinnie's smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned hard. You threatening me, old man? In front of your little girls? He leaned forward. Maybe you forgot who I am." "No." Sania spoke up, her voice steady. "We know exactly who you are." She placed the manila envelope on the table, and so did the police. Vinnie's face darkened. His men started to rise, but he waved them down. "You're bluffing." "The security footage from the hospital," Maya said. "The bank records, witness statements. It's all there. Plus the wire we're wearing right now," Tiana added quietly. For the first time, real fear flashed across Vinnie's face. He lunged across the table, reaching for Brock's throat. "You rat!" he snarled. But before he could make contact, the bar's doors burst open. Detective Martinez led a team of officers inside, their weapons drawn. "Vincenzo Rizzo," she announced clearly. "You're under arrest." Vinnie's men reached for their weapons, but more officers appeared from the back entrance. They were surrounded. "It's over, Vinnie," Brock said firmly, standing tall with his daughters beside him. "You're not going to threaten my family ever again." The officers moved in, securing Vinnie and his men. As they read him his rights, Vinnie glared at Brock and the girls with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he spat as they led him away. Outside the Rusty Nail, red and blue lights flashed against the building's weathered walls. Detective Martinez's team led Vinnie and his men to waiting patrol cars. Brock watched as his old associate, the man who had threatened everything he held dear, disappeared into the back of a police cruiser. "We did it," Maya whispered, her voice trembling with relief. She grabbed her sister's hands, forming a circle around their father. Brock's heart swelled with emotion as he looked at his daughters. Their faces showed the same mix of exhaustion and triumph that he felt. The weight of years of fear and uncertainty lifted from his shoulders. Detective Martinez approached them, tucking her notebook into her jacket pocket. "The evidence you gathered is rock solid," she said. "Between the financial records Sania uncovered and the recorded threats, Vinnie's looking at serious time." She smiled warmly at the family. "You should be proud. It's not often we see this kind of courage." Tiana squeezed her father's hand. "We learned from the best." After giving their official statements, they headed home. The drive was different this time, lighter, filled with gentle conversation and even a few laughs. The setting sun painted the sky in warm colors, as if nature itself was celebrating their victory. At home, they gathered in the living room. Photos of their life together lined the walls. The girls' first day of school, birthday celebrations, ordinary moments that had become precious memories. Brock settled into his favorite armchair, his daughters finding spots around him. "I never thought I'd have this," Brock admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Back when I was with the Angels, I thought being tough meant being alone." He looked at each of his daughters in turn. "You three taught me what real strength is." Sania wiped away a tear. "We were scared too, Dad. When you got sick, when Vinnie was threatening us. But we knew we had to fight. You taught us that, to stand up for what matters. Remember when you first brought us home?" Maya asked, smiling at the memory. "You were this big, scary biker trying to figure out how to change diapers." They all laughed, even Brock. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Still am sometimes. Being a father. It's the toughest job I've ever had. But it's also the best thing I've ever done." Tiana curled up closer to him, just like she used to do as a little girl. "We're going to be okay now, aren't we?" "Yeah, baby," Brock said softly. "We're going to be just fine." They sat together as darkness fell outside, sharing memories and dreams for the future. The house that had felt so tense in recent months was filled with peace again. Their family bond, tested by threats and illness, had emerged stronger than ever. Looking at his daughters, these amazing young women who had saved him in more ways than one, Brock felt a completeness he'd never known in his old life. The tough exterior he'd worn for so long had been transformed by their love, their courage, and their unwavering faith in him. Detective Martinez had called them courageous, but Brock knew the real courage had been in those first steps. Taking in 3 baby girls, leaving behind his old life, choosing love over fear. Everything else had flowed from that decision, leading them to this moment of triumph and peace. "I love you, girls," he said simply, his gruff voice gentle. "We love you too, Dad." They responded in unison, just as they had done since they were little. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Brock sat at the table, a stack of old photographs spread before him. Each image told a story from his past, moments with the hellsangels, faces of men who had once been his brothers. His weathered hands traced the edges of a particularly worn photo, Are those your old friends? Tiana asked, settling into the chair beside him. Her sisters followed, drawn by the rare sight of their father openly examining his past. Brock nodded, picking up a photo of himself standing next to a custom Harley. That's Jake Thunder Thompson, he said, his voice rough with emotion. He taught me everything I knew about bikes. Helped me when I first joined the Angels. Maya leaned closer, studying the image. Have you talked to him since you left? No, Brock admitted, setting the photo down. Didn't talk to any of them after I got you girls. Thought it was safer that way. Sanaya placed her hand on his shoulder. Maybe it's time to change that, Dad. Not everyone from your past is like Vinnie. The suggestion hung in the air. Brock had spent years building walls between his old life and his new one, protecting his daughters from the shadows of his past. But now, with Vinnie behind bars and his family safer than ever, those walls felt less necessary. Jake owns a garage downtown, he said slowly. Still works on bikes. We could go with you, Tiana offered. If you want. Brock looked at his daughters. These incredible young women who had shown him what true courage meant. Their support gave him strength he didn't know he needed. Later that afternoon, Brock's truck pulled into the parking lot of Thunder's Custom Cycles. The familiar smell of oil and leather brought back a flood of memories. The girls waited in the truck, giving their father space for this moment. Jake was working on a motorcycle when Brock walked in. He looked up, his hands freezing mid-motion. 20 years had added gray to his beard and lines around his eyes, but he was still unmistakably Thunder. Well, I'll be damned, Jake said, wiping his hands on a rag. Iron Montgomery. It's just Brock now, he replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The two men stood in silence, years of unspoken words between them. Then Jake stepped forward, pulling Brock into a rough embrace. Heard about what happened with Viper, Jake said as they separated. Also heard you've got 3 daughters who helped take him down. Brock's face softened at the mention of his girls. There's something else, he said proudly. They're actually outside if you'd like to meet them. Jake's eyes widened with genuine interest. The famous triplets? Brother, I'd be honored. When Brock waved them in, the girls entered the garage with curious eyes. Jake greeted them warmly, and soon the tension melted away as he shared stories about their father's younger days, the acceptable ones, carefully chosen. Your old man here, Jake said. He always had a good heart, even back then. That's why none of us were really surprised when he chose to leave for you girls. Brock felt something shift inside him. A weight lifting that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. His daughters beamed with pride, their presence making this bridge between past and present possible. Standing in that garage, surrounded by the echoes of his old life and the joy of his new one, Brock finally understood that he didn't have to keep these worlds separate. His past had shaped him, but his daughters had transformed him, and there was no shame in either truth. The moving truck rumbled down the tree-lined street of their new neighborhood. Brock guided it carefully into the driveway of a modest 2-story house with fresh white paint and dark blue shutters. The front yard boasted a sprawling oak tree, its branches reaching out like welcoming arms. This is really ours? Maya asked, her eyes wide as she hopped out of the passenger seat. Brock nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. All ours, sweetheart. Tiana and Sanaya emerged from the back seat, taking in their new home. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the property, highlighting the flower beds that lined the front walkway and the wooden swing on the wraparound porch. No more looking over our shoulders, Sanaya said softly, squeezing her father's arm. They worked together unloading the truck, forming a chain to pass boxes and furniture into the house. Each item found its new place. Maya's art supplies in the sunny corner room she'd claimed as her studio, Tiana's books filling the built-in shelves in the living room, and Sanaya's collection of family photos arranged carefully on the walls. Brock carried his old leather jacket upstairs, no longer feeling the need to hide it away. He hung it proudly in his closet, a reminder of where he'd come from and how far he'd come. The girls had taught him that his past wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was part of their story. As afternoon settled into evening, the kitchen came alive with the sounds of unpacking. Boxes of dishes clinked as they were emptied, and drawers slid open and closed as utensils found their new homes. The smell of pasta sauce filled the air, their first meal in their new home taking shape on the stove. Maya set the table with their mismatched plates. They hadn't unpacked the good ones yet. While Tiana chopped fresh herbs from their small container garden, one of the first things they'd brought over, Sanaya stirred the sauce, adding a pinch of their grandmother's secret spice blend. Brock watched his daughters move around the kitchen with easy familiarity. The sight of them, safe and happy, made his chest tighten with emotion. These weren't the tiny babies he'd brought home from the adoption agency anymore. They were strong, capable women who had fought alongside him to protect their family. When everything was ready, they gathered around the table. Warm garlic bread steamed in its basket, and the pasta gleamed with rich sauce. Brock poured water into 4 glasses, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. "Before we eat," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I want to say something." He lifted his glass, looking at each of his daughters in turn. Their faces glowed in the soft kitchen light, expectant and loving. "You girls," he started, then paused, collecting himself. "You've taught me more about strength and courage than all my years with the angels ever did. This house, this new start, it's because of you. Because you showed me that facing the past is better than running from it." The girls' eyes glistened with tears as they raised their glasses to meet his. In that moment, the kitchen felt full of more than just the aroma of dinner. It held the warmth of their bond, the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve, and the promise of their future together. "To family," Brock said simply, his voice thick with pride. "To family," his daughters echoed, their glasses clinking together in the golden evening light. After dinner, they moved to the front porch, settling into the wooden rocking chairs they'd arranged in a cozy circle. The evening air was mild, carrying the sweet scent of nearby jasmine. Crickets chirped their evening symphony, and fireflies began to dance in the growing twilight. Brock leaned back in his chair, feeling more at peace than he had in years. The weight that had pressed on his chest for so long, the fear, the guilt, the constant vigilance, had finally lifted. He watched his daughters, each lost in their own thoughts as they rocked gently. Maya sketched in her notebook, occasionally glancing up to capture the way the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Tiana had her legs tucked under her, a familiar position that reminded Brock of when she was little. Sanaya's fingers drummed absently on the armrest of her chair, a habit she'd picked up from him. "You know," Brock began, his voice soft but steady, "I never thought I'd have this." He gestured to the scene around them, the peaceful neighborhood, the beautiful house, his 3 remarkable daughters. "Have what, Dad?" Tiana asked, tilting her head. "This peace, this," he searched for the right words, "this feeling of being exactly where I'm supposed to be." Sania reached over and squeezed his hand. Her touch was gentle, reassuring, so different from the world he'd known before them. "I want you girls to know something," Brock continued, sitting up straighter. "Everything that happened, everything we went through, it showed me what really matters." He cleared his throat, fighting past his usual reluctance to express his feelings. "And what matters is you 3. It's always been you 3. Maya set down her sketchbook, giving him her full attention. The setting sun caught the tears in her eyes, making them sparkle. "I know I wasn't always the best at showing it," Brock admitted. "Being there emotionally, I mean. But I promise you, from now on I'm here, really here. No more walls, no more secrets." "Dad," Tiana said softly, "you've always been there for us. Even when you were struggling, we knew you loved us." "Yeah," Sania added, "you might not have said it much, but we saw it in everything you did. Every lunch you packed, every time you came to our school events, every time you worked late to give us what we needed." Brock's chest tightened with emotion. "Well, I'm saying it now. I love you girls more than anything in this world. And I promise you, whatever comes next, whatever life throws at us, I'll be right here. No running, no hiding. We face it together." Maya stood up and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "We know, Dad. We love you too." Tiana and Sania joined the embrace, and for a moment, they stayed like that, holding on to each other as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky. The past, with all its darkness and fear, felt distant now, like a storm that had finally passed. The girls pulled back, each wearing bright smiles that reminded Brock of when they were little. But now those smiles held something more: understanding, strength, and the deep bond that had been forged through their struggles. Looking at his daughters' faces, Brock saw not just the babies he'd adopted all those years ago, but the incredible women they'd become. Women who had taught him about courage, about love, about what it really meant to be strong. Their future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope, and for the first time in his life, Brock felt truly, completely whole. 5 years had passed since that evening on the porch. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of Brock's home as he prepared breakfast. The sizzle of bacon and the rich aroma of coffee filled the air. At 63, his hair had turned completely silver, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made him smile. His girls were home for their monthly family breakfast, a tradition they'd kept even as they'd moved out to pursue their dreams. Tiana entered first, wearing her doctor's coat. She'd just finished her night shift at the local hospital's pediatric ward. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, but her smile was bright as ever. "Morning, Dad," she said, kissing his cheek before pouring herself a cup of coffee. Sania followed, already dressed in her business attire. She'd become a successful lawyer, fighting for children's rights and families in need. Her briefcase sat by the door, ready for another day at the courthouse. "Something smells amazing," she said, settling into her usual spot at the table. Maya bounced in last, her artist's smock splattered with paint. She'd opened her own art studio downtown, teaching children and creating murals that brightened the city's walls. "Dad, you didn't have to go all out," she said, even as she snagged a piece of bacon from the pan. Brock shooed her away with a spatula, his heart full as he watched them fall into their familiar patterns. Tiana, setting the table, Sania reading the morning news on her tablet, Maya humming as she helped with the cooking. "Your old man likes taking care of his girls," he said gruffly, but his eyes were soft. "Even if they're all grown up now." As they sat down to eat, Brock couldn't help but marvel at the women before him. Each had carved out her own path, yet they remained fiercely connected, to each other and to him. The tough exterior he'd worn for so long had mellowed, transformed by years of their love and trust. "Remember when we first moved into this house?" Sanaya asked, buttering her toast. "We were so scared of everything back then. And look at us now," Tiana added, reaching for the syrup. "You taught us to be strong, Dad, to face our fears." Maya nodded, her eyes bright. "You showed us that it's never too late to change, to become better." Brock cleared his throat, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "You girls taught me that too, more than you'll ever know." The morning light painted golden streaks across the kitchen table as they finished their breakfast. Outside, the neighborhood was coming alive. Children heading to school, people walking their dogs, life moving forward as it always did. They stood together, clearing the dishes, moving in the comfortable choreography of family. Brock watched his daughters, these incredible women who had once been tiny babies in his arms. Tiana's compassion, Sanaya's determination, Maya's creativity. They'd grown into exactly who they were meant to be. The past, the violence, the fear, the hellsangels, felt like a distant dream now. In its place stood this reality, a family bound not by blood but by choice, by love, by years of standing together through every storm. As they prepared to head out for their respective days, they gathered in the front hall. Brock looked at his daughters, his chest swelling with pride. They were strong, independent, and kind, everything he'd hoped they'd become and more. They stood together, the morning sun streaming through the windows, illuminating their faces. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities, and they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, as a family. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.